Hello,
Love that.
welcome. I always feel like doing a soft voice after one of those intros. That music this week was brought to you by Simon and Rich, who picked the numbers 5 and 4. So we went for 4 and 6. So we went for number 5. A nice little jazz piano bit there. It's all copyright free. That's why it's all a bit cheesy at the moment. Hello and welcome. I think this may well be our final show before Christmas. This episode's not going to date well, is it? Pulling clips out in 2 months' time for social posts and all the rest. Yeah. Right. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. It's Friday. It's somewhere around 12:15, and it's another law firm marketing show and tell with this week's special guest, David Opie. Hello, David. How are you?
Hello, David. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. We've already been confused by the two Davids in the room. We're going to have to sort of work out a way in which we differentiate between us, aren't we? Otherwise, it's going to get a bit awkward.
It always gets awkward on this show. Don't you worry about that. That's not a problem. So, David, let's hear a little bit about who you are, what you do, before we get started with the interrogation, the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm David Opie. I run an organisation called Today's Media, which is probably best known for our online news publications, Today's Conveyancer, Today's Wills and Probate, and Today's Family Lawyer. The three publications have been going for a little while, about 10 years for the conveyancing one, 7 or 8 for the Wills and Probate one. And then just a couple of years for the family law publication. But we also then have quite an active events schedule and are the organisers of the British Wills and Probate Awards, which have been going for 4 years, and the British Conveyancing Awards, which we've just relaunched for 2022. That's coming up in March. So yeah, we definitely don't like to sit on our hands. We like to keep ourselves busy. It's an awful lot of fun.
That sounds good. Always good when it's fun as well. So, yeah. David, we will come back to you shortly. First of all, I love the pictures behind you there. Lovely.
Very carefully cultivated scene, isn't it? Apart from the sideshow Bob plant that appears out of my head.
I thought that was a fabulous touch. I need to get something similar myself. I think that will work well. You normally have a unicorn behind Simon there, but it looks like it's taken a holiday break. Oh no! Front and center with the unicorn. Right. So before we dive in completely, let's get the introductions from everyone else, and let's start with Kat. Hello, Kat. How are you this week?
Very good. How are you?
Good. You're looking very sparkly. I know. It was buy one get two, three with the Santa hats. So hence there's 3 of us with.
Yeah. Mad panic running around rooms trying to find something that's Santa-esque. I'm Kat Collier. I head up Player Insight, and we're a research agency focused on law firms and accountancy firms, and that's us in a nutshell.
Fabulous festive nutshell too. Thank you very much, Kat. And let's go on to our favourite Marvel superhero himself.
Thank you,
Mr.
David.
Iron Man Rich.
Mr. Iron Man, there he is, which Noah loves looking at every time I bring him in here. I'm Rich Dibbins, Staxton Digital, specialising in digital marketing, social media and LinkedIn for law firms, helping them get the most and stand out on social media.
Great to have you joining us again. I like the Christmas jumper. Are you gonna stand up and there you go. Home Alone special.
Absolutely.
And then finally,
I remember when Rich was in the original movie.
It's going to be one of those shows, isn't it?
It really is.
It is. Have we all started drinking yet? Oh, that's a different show. That's a different show.
Nice. It's gone high class.
I was going to say. And finally, but not last of all, it is what do you have yourself? A Dobby's Oh, Daddy Elf. That's
Daddy
it.
Elf on it. Not dog with anything, cheeky monkey. Hi, I'm
Hello,
Simon
Daddy
Michael.
Elf.
I run TBD marketing. We do a variety of different things for law firms and lawyers. Check us out on LinkedIn. I can only apologise for the inspirational picture behind my shoulder here as well. I've moved rooms, and my teenagers insist on having this kind of rubbish up on the wall. So if you're feeling slightly nauseous because of that, I'll turn off my camera. It's fine.
That is.
David, don't forget to introduce yourself, David, as well. Yeah.
Who's it with me? Oh, hi, I'm David. Nice to meet you. So now I'm David SAYCE. I am a digital marketing consultant with PaperGecko. I deal a lot with audits, migrations, and digital strategy with companies, often around professional services and the B2B area, in amongst many other things. So let's see. Oh, good. I think there were some connection issues coming in, but Wayne has joined us. Good to see that. Great. It looks like there might be continuing issues with LinkedIn, but we will see how this goes. Otherwise, we get a twofer and it just gets reposted later in the week. That's absolutely fine. So let's start. Who's got some questions for David to get us started then?
I'd love to start. I think one of the burning questions with the awards is, what does potentially the future of 2022, the legal law landscape, look for the legal sector? What does it look like? What do you envisage happening? A duplicate of 2021 again? Or I know it's hard to predict, but what do you hope and think 2022 will bring?
How long have you got, Rich?
You've got 45 minutes.
Right. Okay. Fine. We specialize. Most of what we do specializes in sort of consumer law, private client law. So the publications, it won't take a rocket scientist to work out who we're focused on with the conveyancing, wills and probate and family sectors. But clearly conveyancing in particular has gone through a huge amount of change over the last 18 months. I think you've seen the wills and probate sector change massively as well, in the sense that there's nothing quite like a pandemic for people to realize their own mortality. Sadly, family lawyers will find themselves very busy over the next 12 to 18 months as the realities of sort of lockdown and living with people that we no longer find particularly enjoyable to live with. The realities of that hit. So, I think that the legal landscape has been busy. I think we'll continue to see that. Certainly from an employment point of view, I think we'll probably see this sort of change, the way that the legal firms operate in terms of how they employ people, the work life balance, that kind of thing. Very similar to sort of lots of other sectors that we've seen. And I guess from our own point of view, we just want to stay in touch and keep on top of how that sort of plays out. And it's a fine balance, because on the one hand you want to lead as a business, as you guys will in your own businesses, but particularly with events, and as I say, we've got the conveyancing awards coming up in March. We're very much in the hands of what government policy looks like between now and then, because of course it could all go very wrong over the course of the next couple of weeks. So I said, how long have we got? That's a bit of a clipped answer, I suppose, isn't it? But
no, definitely. I guess a follow-up question, not just for the law firms, but I guess obviously legal providers as well. A lot of key players, InfoTrack, Perfect Portal, yes, a lot of these kind of legal providers get, majority of their leads or network at these events. What's the kind of feedback from them in terms of, for 22? What would they like to see? Obviously in person, but how do you think it's going to affect them?
That's a really good question, Rich. Certainly talking to legal providers, thrive off being out and about, and certainly the last quarter of this year we've seen a lot of events shoehorned into a very short space of time. I suppose the challenge for providers like ourselves is how you ensure that you get that engagement for the people that ultimately pay your wages, because a lot of these events are free to attend, and they don't happen without the support of sponsors and exhibitors and people like that. So the challenge from an events organizer's point of view is to capture that engagement in a way that actually provides return on investment for the suppliers, and that's tough. There's no two ways about it. We've seen virtual events, we've seen in-person events, albeit on a smaller scale. The reality is that there's somewhere down the middle that will probably work best, but I can't honestly say that from an exhibition and a conference point of view, I've seen anybody walk that line hugely successfully. I think it's a really tricky balance between getting people in the room in person, but then actually getting the engagement from people that are joining digitally.
Gotcha.
There's a few
Absolutely.
nods around the room. I can see. Is that an experience that you guys have had?
I think from what I'm saying, I mean, this pandemic is really shining a light on events in general. Whether they are in person, whether they're digital, what the mix is and what the future with it might be. But I think the other thing is, it's, as you say, getting the attribution, those figures from events back into the business. I think that's actually becoming more and more important now. And I think the shift of events becoming more digital means there are elements of that are actually a little easier to capture. But I think we've got a long ways to go with it, yes.
Can I share something from back at the beginning of the kind of first lockdown as well? We saw, it's not just hearing tell of, but actually quite a bit of detail about what happened to firms, they're both top 30 firms, within the space of the same kind of time frame as each other, right at the beginning. One furloughed their events team, like instantly, when they kind of knew what was going on, and the other one doubled down on its digital first strategy and pivoted immediately. Now that second firm went from an average of 60, 70 people coming into those events, David, face to face, which are great, as you know, because they're going to convert eventually, right? We're going to find the right people to do business within that room. And I know for a fact that some of their events recently, even these small, like breakfast kind of updates that just last a few minutes, got 600 people coming up to them as well, right? So it wasn't just a question of like, what do we experience? How ready were you is a hugely important part of it, I think. But actually, did you make the right decision in the moment as to what to do? Because if you pivoted the wrong way with that, and that wasn't the only firm, I think David, me, and Rich, I think know someone in common as well, whose firm pivoted the other way as well, and they lost all of their kind of future revenue source as a result of it as well. And I think it was a big mistake to just say to events there won't be any events, and to not work out actually there's a whole world out there going on that we need to cater for. And those firms that have really risen up the rankings will probably dominate, I think, David, because they'll be ready when everything does open back up again properly, just to hit the ground running. They seem to be hungrier, mid-sized and smaller firms of them, and the really, really big firms. The ones that aren't getting it, I think, are in that kind of permafrost layer in the middle. Might be a bit weighty or just a bit slow to, frankly, make decisions in terms of management decisions.
I think that's a very valid point, Simon. I suppose my challenge to even the organisation that's getting sort of 600 people along is engagement, and actually, digital platform providers seem to be moving in the direction of trying to capture or gauge that engagement in some way as well. Because I think it's very easy, particularly for a Zoom call or a Teams meeting or something like that, to sort of turn up and perhaps phone listening in, or turn the camera off, or something along those lines. And I think go to online training and all sorts of different things like that, isn't it? It's really the challenge around how we get that engagement, that return on investment, the real sort of capturing of people's interests through digital means.
And I think that's driven down to the style of content. I've sat sat on countless legal events that were held online. Some were really, really well attended, really good and enjoyable, just for the fact that the content wasn't. It's not like they took in-person content and just chucked it on from into a digital view. They completely revamped it and changed it, and that captured my attention because. As we all know, with digital, the attention span is very low, but it was consistently grabbing my attention and going through it, and I liked it. Some others just took what they did in person and put it in digital form, and then wondered why it didn't work. Well, you have to tailor for your audience and the medium you're going to produce it for. When I did LegalX this year, LegalX day one wasn't as busy as day one 2 years ago. And day two, I called it, come midday, it was like a ghost town. But a lot of the companies there were tailored for what it was like 2 years ago. And I felt you needed to change it up, and you needed to switch it up. You've got a smaller audience coming in. You needed to do something different. But a lot of people were doing the same thing 2 years ago, which just doesn't warrant anymore. So, yeah, I'm all for digital. I'm all for in-person. I just think you need to put the right medium and content for the right, if you're going to be in person or digital.
Context is everything, right?
Definitely.
Context is everything. The other thing that happens on Digi as well, and I think Rich has made a really valid point there, which is, and David, you know you're going to love this, right? I think that people confuse that digital channel with the state of intent. The intent is not the same, right? So if you've got into the room and gone to see something face to face, you probably had a certain level of intent, Rich, right? You were already interested in the subject matter. You were willing to kind of engage with it, ready to like consider buying it. All Digi is not the same, is it? We know that. If people come and watch this seminar, they're not going to immediately buy something for the back of it. It's a generality. It's a brand awareness piece for everyone on this call, as it were. Their intent is unlikely to mean that even the great David SAYCE gets instructed directly off the back of the video necessarily, right? Especially if he doesn't release it till March, I might add. But, you know, so that, and confusing that, Rich, in how those things are designed from the events team and the marketing team looking at it is a huge mistake the firm's made as well. They need to look and go, is this an awareness webinar? In which case, check out on LinkedIn, open the doors, get everyone through the door as much as possible, barriers to entry be as low as possible. Let's get the audience in. Or is it a, you know, conversion strategy kind of, you know, marketing approach? In which case, we're trying to qualify these leads. How are we going to do it? And David's much more of an expert at those things than I have. David Opie, I mean, David SAYCE probably is too, right? But the idea of converting those leads. But I think we have to go and think they're not the same thing as each other. They look very, very similar. They run the same way. They have, you know, brilliant chairmen running them like David, right? SAYCE, that was, you know, but fundamentally, they're not the same product. They're not trying to achieve the same things as each other. And I think the firms are getting au fait with that, but I still think they've got a way to go. And whenever I talk to lawyers, Rich, I don't know about you, they're always surprised that people don't have much more clear thinking about this is comms, this is broad marketing, this is narrow marketing, this is BD. You know, that people don't say to them, where are we? What are these people trying to achieve? What are we trying to get them to do? What do they want us to do? And I think that we need to hear a bit more on that from the digital events guys.
Yeah, and that's what I got from LegalX. When I was speaking to everybody, I was kind of like, you know, what did you get out of it? They just went, no, we've got no sales, no inquiries. And I went, is that how you think about it? And they went, well, what do you mean? I said, well, break it down into multiple factors. One, you're being seen. Two, you've got clients here. So you've got multiple clients under one roof. You don't have to travel everywhere. Three, basically, you then get inquiries. And then four, it's kind of a brand awareness as well. So I said, don't think of it as just getting leads. I said, if you just think of it as that, you failed already. Because nobody's going to come up and buy from you day one if they don't know you from Adam. You're not selling, you're not selling champagne. You're selling a professional service. And we know law firms take time in their buying process. So breaking it down into those and then attributing that across, I think law firms would understand, legal providers would understand it as well. Because a lot of legal providers go, yeah, it wasn't good for us. We didn't sell anything. Well, you're not going to on day one. So break it down into those aspects and then review it in 3 to 6 months of what you got and then look at it next year and whether or not it's worth it. So that's how I always kind of, not say convince, but kind of demonstrated that to individuals. Otherwise, yeah, their blinkers go on, we didn't sell. It's not worth it.
One of the things that the smaller firms got right, I think, in that employment law issue right at the beginning of furlough, David Opie, I'm talking about here now, is that they and it'd be same with wills, right? They immediately had to think about how people are going to like countersign a will, right? There was loads of important information needed passing on to people very urgently, right? And those firms who just got on and then did a 5-minute presentation, but just did a Q&A for 55 minutes, those guys won. They won the pandemic. I mean, it's a horrible thing to describe it as, but you know what I mean? As in, their marketing efforts paid off, because what they did was say, we know enough to give you some guidance, and now we will take any question that you've got related. And that openness to doing that, where there is no way of doing this. We're not going to lecture you for 45 minutes, but like I'm doing at the moment. Right, that actually became a really interesting business model. And I've seen some of those firms, Rich, you know what I'm thinking of as well, with Alice and those guys, who've grown massively on the back of that transparency, openness, just saying, we will listen to your questions and answer them. And we're here next week, and we're here the week after, and we're here the week after. HCR did it, I think, with employment law as well. We saw some others do it on contested kind of probate, David, that have grown massively over the course of last year. That IDR, you know, there's some firms that are really open to just being, we'll talk for 5 minutes, but we're going to listen for 45 minutes instead. And that is an answer to those questions. That's what people wanted in a time of uncertainty.
And to come back to, you know, what Rich has been talking about, that's the nature of the content that you deliver through digital channels, isn't it? You know, as you guys have been chatting about, you know, actually what people want to see on social and what we share is very different to what we might deliver through some of the other channels that we choose to use, you know, some marketing channels or, you know, offline channels. You know, certainly we've encouraged organizations to what I call tell, not sell. And it's all about adding value to the relationship, and just being a whole lot more open to actually, you know, telling people more about how they can solve their issues and adding value to that relationship than worrying too much about the sale at the outset.
Definitely. And I kind of echo that point. It's also being different in the digital. If you're going to do digital events, how can you stand out and be different? And there were a number of providers that did some really good, smart marketing. So the one thing that everybody does at a legal conference is there's always the coffee and croissants at the beginning. They sent out breakfast packs in the morning and people received these. It was very well timed, very, you know, military managed. But they received breakfast packs in the morning ready for them to be in front at 9:30. Then somebody sponsored the drinks, and a drinks package was delivered in the afternoon for them. So they were trying to mirror the in-person experience, but in an online capacity. And I love that idea. I mean, you know, it is a logistical nightmare to do all that, especially if you're going to do it for hundreds of delegates. But that for me was like, you really care about that. You've put some thought behind it. And I think the money they saved on doing a in-person event, they did it. Basically, they used that money for another area. So they just kind of switched it around.
I think one of the big challenges you're going to find with legal events in 2022 is convincing people to leave their home, leave the office, and actually, you know, the whole mantra of, you know, if you build it, they will come, is probably going to start to go out the window over the next 12 to 18 months, because we've become very, very comfortable sat, and I spot you guys are all in your look as though you're all in your home offices. You know, we've become very, very comfortable sat at home, enjoying the comforts of working from home.
I think that was, if I'm honest, that was always the case. The content always had to be interesting enough to drag people away. But I think that we got, sometimes in the industry, it can be a bit, I don't say lazy about it, but you know what I mean? Like that idea of we weren't cognizant enough about what would draw people towards us. I think that the other thing I'd say, David, is that it was always the networking that a lot of people came for, wasn't it? they wanted to do that bit. They want to go and you know smack elbows with someone else and say hello and like check in and see how they're doing, as well as listen to that content. I think the thing that will get people back out of their homes again, apart from staring at the same four walls, is that opportunity to have that human interaction, to ask their favourite lawyers some questions as well. Do you know what I mean? There's yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be networking that gets back out as well as good content.
I think networking is one of the absolute key areas, and I think it is definitely. I mean, I'm seeing a lot more events the last few months coming into my inbox, live in-person events, and it's interesting because part of me is wondering, well, okay, you've got this, it's set up for March time. Or some of the early ones were set up for November, December. Where are we going to be? What's the state going to be? Are we actually going to be able to get there? But I think the networking is going to play a huge part, and it has played a huge part to date. But I think it's also time for people to up their game games when it comes to events as well, how things are presented. I think the days of people standing in front of a screen reading off the bulleted PowerPoint notes are hopefully for the most part gone. And believe me, you're talking to somebody who had to sit through 80 minutes of somebody going through bullet points on GDPR once. That was terrible.
They're not gone. They're not. They're definitely not gone, because that was a number of the speakers at LegalX. Sorry, LegalX speakers, but please stop reading the slides. That was the case, and I just walked past those speakers. Some of the good. Judge Rinder, really good speaker, by the way. I know he's a professor. A really good speaker when I saw him at LegalX. But yeah, the death by PowerPoint is live and kicking, unfortunately.
It's interesting that you guys talk about the networking opportunities, because that's something that we've certainly seen echoed in the events that we've run in person more recently, and the opportunity to network with people. Of course, you run an awards event, and most awards dues take sort of most of the evening, don't they? You know, you sort of have a bit of food, a few awards, all the rest of it. Actually, we flipped the whole thing on its head, because we recognized that the audience, we needed to cater to the virtual audience as much as the in-person audience. And so the virtual ceremony, the virtual awards ceremony, was much shorter than it might otherwise have been normally. So it was about an hour and a half long, something like that. Which is no mean feat when you've got to get people to sort of wander from the table up to the stage and back down again, because essentially we sort of live videoed the ceremony. But what it did mean was that because we did that sort of at the end of the workday, about 4 or 5 o'clock-ish, something like that, it gave us the rest of the afternoon and evening then to do a whole host of networking opportunities. And actually, we had a huge amount of really positive feedback around that, because as lovely as awards ceremonies are, a bit like your death by PowerPoint, they don't half drag on sometimes. And actually, the reason that people were there was to see everybody that they'd not seen for 18 months. And it worked really, really well. So that's something that we're going to mirror in the March ceremony, where we'll cater to the virtual audience with the ceremony, but then really look to give people the opportunity to take advantage of having traveled, be there, and spend time with other people in the room.
Are you seeing as many law firms apply for each category? Is there any kind of change in that? Have there been more firms or more smaller firms putting themselves forward?
There are always the sort of the same organisations that get involved that you see regularly. I think and I will answer your question, I promise. I would go back to some of the messaging that you have as part of the awards ceremony. So one of the we ran an awards ceremony in the conveyancing space in 2021, in March of in May of 2021, which was all about recognising the industry's response to the pandemic. And in actual fact, because we sit in a very privileged position as a publication, today's Conveyance is very well known, very well respected. The fact that we as a publication were going out to try and recognize the work of the industry really played into our favor, and we had a lot of entries from people who I think probably traditionally wouldn't have entered awards, who sort of felt compelled to do so because they wanted to recognize the work that the whole of the industry was doing. It really sort of came together over the last sort of 18 months. And so one of the challenges for next year is really about how we replicate that strength of message. We don't want to harp on about the pandemic. We don't want to sort of talk about looking backwards. We really want to look at what the future looks like. But equally, the challenge there then is to get people who don't traditionally enter awards to really buy into that message and really buy into wanting to enter it. And I think the way that we've tried to do that is by really mixing up the categories, so that they aren't these traditional ones, the law firms of the year, the regional winners, all that sort of business. Actually, we've kind of tried to drill into what is going to be important in the sector over the next 12 to 18 months, and therefore what is going to be important to recognize in terms of excellence. And yet we are seeing, again, firms who you wouldn't consider traditionally to enter the awards saying, do you know what? Yeah, we'd like to put our hands up and get involved in this.
Simon looking puzzled there.
I was just wondering whether to share some thoughts from, I don't know if, Rich, have you been to Mitchell Moore's Property Awards?
Mitchell Moore's Property? No, I haven't seen it.
David, have you been to them? David Opie, I'm asking.
I have not, no.
It's the only law firm that I know that runs its own award ceremony, like for an industry.
Yeah,
but runs it to the extent that it's actually self-funding, as far as I'm aware. Right, so they get sponsors to sponsor what it's done so well over the years, and I think that's quite an interesting take on how to kind of do things. I was lucky enough to go a couple of years ago. It's down in Exeter that they hold it at the rugby club, soon to be known as the former Chiefs. It was just a really interesting approach because they kind of owned all of it. Do you know what I mean? Like and there's an aspect to there that's quite interesting. The amount of energy they must have poured into that campaign as well over the years. So I was just thinking about that as Kat was wondering what I was wistfully kind of staring at the ceiling for as well. I think it must be hard to pivot that, online when you've run something like that as well, when you're not, fundamentally an event organisation at first. But yeah, there's a lot of goodwill that happened around those awards previously that they could tap into, I'm sure. But I think you're right about that. I've come across it with some of the clients that we've got, that diversity, David Opie, of the categories not allowing you to enter certain firms, and some firms consistently sitting just outside those categories can be a bit frustrating. It's like, why should this firm be excluded? When we notice as well, David, they seem to regularly be run by women, those firms. Right, so the categories always seem to serve kind of the status quo, as it were, and it's a bit like it's a bit annoying now. Something needs to be done differently. I love what you're saying there about using different methods. I've seen the reason that was making me think of the Mitchell Moore's one is that I've seen some pre-briefings really helpful for firms to encourage people to take part as well, kind of in award ceremonies, as in the journalists, the judges, and others to sit down with people who might even consider entering and saying your default position should be we're entering this and here's why and how to get involved and do that. I think that's really helpful to kind of diversify the pool of applicants. Anyway, that's what I was thinking about, Kat. More than
Very good.
Now, there's been a few things that I've seen on LinkedIn over the last month around awards where people are invited to the awards because they have been selected, but they have to buy a table, or they have to basically pay for awards. So as long as if you pay, there's a high chance you're going to win the award. What's your take on these? Because there's been a lot of controversy there. People are going, so if I pay to enter, I'm basically getting an award. It's like honors for money or whatever they called it in the government. What's your take on that?
It won't surprise you to know, Rich, that I take a very dim view of that sort of activity. It's I mean, it has its place. I suppose you've got to take a step back and say to yourself, well, what's the value of this to my business? We go back to all the different kind of communications that we send out as organizations, and is as Simon saying, is this a PR piece, is this a communications piece, is it a sales piece, whatever it is that we're sort of trying to communicate. Awards are only, I suppose, they're another form of marketing for the organization, and it's how they perceive the value of that in their business. If outwardly, you're seen to be paying for that, then I don't see how that can genuinely add value to your business. Whereas if you've been through a sort of reasonably thorough judging process that's independent and judged by peers or people that are sort of aware of the industry, then to me that adds an awful lot more value to you as a business than cash for honours, which I think was probably the phrase you were looking for.
That wasn't what I meant.
There's only one award that you should be comfortable accepting if you didn't enter in the first place, and that's something that the Queen gives you, right? So if the Queen says you got an MBE, Rich, take it, right? But any other award that you're not something you filled in the submission form for, it's probably not worth having, to be frank.
I know of some that have tried to game the honours roll as well. Yes.
We have an award today by a title who contacted me So TBD Marketing's been put forward for an M&A Law Firm of the Year award. So we're really quite chuffed today. We think that we might be shortlisted for that. I'll let you know how we get on against Freshfields, Give a Chance, A&O, and TBD Marketing, a non-mergers and acquisitions law firm.
I'm sure you'll do well. We've had a question come through from living rent-free in your head. We've got to find out what your name is, because it's such a mouthful to say that every time. Hello again. So they're asking about events that take place in the metaverse. Are we seeing agencies gearing up for this? Is that something that is going to be the next big thing? Anyone have any take on that?
I don't think law firms will even comprehend what the metaverse is about at this time. I think it's way too early to tell. I would love it if there was a law society that was brave enough to set up real estate within the metaverse and start, creating their own legal environment. I've been watching the metaverse very closely and what's being up there. At the moment, it's all huge brands, household brands, but I've not seen anything in the UK. Definitely nothing legal. I would love for somebody to go, we've just purchased space in the metaverse and we've got a grid. I think it will be something, because I know we discussed over offline VR for 2022. But I think law firms are still getting to grips with the general technology of Zoom and Teams. If we suddenly chuck the metaverse in there as well, I think some people's heads might explode. So I would love it if there was. There was something,
this must have been
I'm going to give you the answer,
mid-2000s.
Field Fisher and Second Life you're going to talk about, aren't you?
Second Life, that's it.
Field Fisher did it in Second Life back in 2002-3, sometime then. And they took out a shop in the what was the Metaverse 1.0 as it was at that point in time. So I think Rich is right that mass adoption will be somewhere down the line, but I think someone will have the guts to go with it and say, well, wait, isn't this our brand? Aren't we a technology law firm? Don't we need to be seen to be there? So if you got someone like Mofo or Cooley or someone like that who advises Facebook, right, doing it, then I could see that working quite well. They were probably involved in the original development of the metaverse stuff in the first place. But that's a really good question, though, isn't it? Are you thinking about what could you do differently in there? Rich, I don't know the answer to that you wouldn't be doing sat just watching through Zoom. I suppose you just feel like you're sat in a room with each other, but then you might as well just be sat in a room with each other. Maybe I'm getting old.
Yeah, well, no, there is that, but it's the whole aspect of it's interactive. So obviously, we're in this space now. There's 5 of us. But having like the fact that we could draw upon, we could have our LinkedIn screen and say, well, we could do something interactive. I love the idea of it. Don't get me wrong. It's getting the audience who are going to engage at that level as well. You need to get that adoption into it. It's hard enough getting, some lawyers are still understanding. I gave a workshop this morning to a wonderful client, the standard basics of LinkedIn. So I would love all 5 of us to be in some kind of metaverse room, who knows what kind of what's the term, your avatar, what it will be, giant.
We know what yours is going to be, don't we?
Of course, it's going to be Iron Man without a shadow of a doubt. So I would love it, and I think it would be incredibly interactive and a great uptake for people who are technology enabled. There's a guy who is a digital lawyer, Peter. His name eludes me. I'm sure I'd love to have his take on it. It's a fantastic Peter Wright, who's a digital lawyer, crypto and everything like that. I'd love to get his take on what he thinks the metaverse, how it could affect the legal sector. Maybe a future guest, Peter, if you're watching.
I'm seeing Mitch Jackson as well talk a lot about it.
Yeah, well, the answer's got to be about client demand, hasn't it? At the moment, it could be just another white elephant for not careful. Right, and that's what law firms got to be really careful not to do with it. Right, is the client going to put on a VR headset and then sit in your webinar? David Opie will be much better placed to tell us the answer to that than anyone else ahead of time, because he'll have people saying to him, "I'm not coming to this in-person event, but I want to experience it as if I'm there. Can you send me a virtual cocktail?" Right, and then that will be where the answers stem from. It should come from client demand, not from supply, I would suggest.
I think I'd echo that, Simon. Just say it's horses for courses, isn't it? I think if the law firms, if consumers of legal services are looking for this, then law firms themselves are going to be looking to adopt it. I think as as an events provider into the legal services sector, as Rich says, we're a long way behind in terms of quite a number of the innovations that happen in technology, and therefore I'd anticipate that this is a slower burn.
Well, let's just keep posted, because I think 2022 we'll see law firm marketing show and tell maybe move into the metaverse. Who knows?
Love it.
I think there's some legal issues that will arise as a result of other people running metaverse events, and lawyers someone should do a paper on what that is, because that would be quite an interesting subject matter as well. It's not as simple as people think in terms of David. Again, if you're thinking like the kind of content that you'd share in a small kind of networking group might be very different if people are able to then. You can hear that you're buttressing up against the limit of my knowledge around the metaverse, right? Quite easily, but the idea of what is secure and safe, and what's the Chatham House set of rules and what isn't, and see what I mean, there's loads of challenges that come up there. So I don't know if anyone's watching as a lawyer fancies doing a paper on that. I guarantee you get a lot of readership if you wrote a piece called how will the metaverse affect your events, and what legal ramifications has it got if you kind of run one badly, as it were.
Well, we had, I wouldn't say metaverse, but we had kind of a virtual / real life kind of style a few years back with Pokemon Go, didn't we? Everybody going around with their phones, going into different areas, finding all these, the avatars, or I've never played Pokemon Go, finding all these things and then getting themselves into hot water because somebody's created something in, I think it was Auschwitz. There was like a thing that they could collect in there, and people were, climbing all over things which had not been touched for a long time. And then that was then taken into the legal world because people were getting sued for, personal injury, walking into the road because they were looking at their phones, driving into rivers. So absolutely right. There is a legal ramification of how and what's going to impact them. I can imagine people with their VR headsets on, enjoying a virtual cocktail. Next thing you know, they're walking into their monitor or tripping down the stairs kind of thing. So I think
there's a Darwinian element to this as well.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, I've got to say. It feels like self-selection is just... Because I live on the edge of the Downs here, obviously, as you know, and there are a lot of people looking for Pokemon, and I thought, if you don't look up in a minute, you're just going to walk straight off the seawalls, basically. So, you might want to look at what you're doing a bit more carefully. A bit of self-selection. So,
it's food for thought, but we are way, way off from that. Until the legal sector masters... Can you hear me? Can you see me? Kind of, Zoom and Teams, or even Google Breakout or anything like that. I think we're a way off from creating something. I think between our team, I think we could have a great metaverse setup. I'm still looking into how to create it and buy real estate in it. I just bought my first NFT last week, so I'm very much invested in it all.
I didn't realise it was this easy to take money off you, Rich. I've got some crypto that I'd like you to purchase. If you're in for buying NFTs, then I bought an NFT and it cost me 0.03 Ethereum. It was just, I'm just testing the water. I wanted to see what it was about. I haven't bought a Yacht Club 8 monkey, whatever they called it. Not in that realm yet. But I'm always curious about these digital assets and everything like that. And Gary Vee did slightly off topic. He says, rather than giving somebody an invoice, give somebody an NFT and take 10% of the royalties every time that NFT goes off somewhere. I only know one lawyer at the moment who's even looking or talking about NFT. So that's definitely a subject for 2022 for us because it is hot topic at the moment.
I think that's definitely one to look at. In the meantime, I think the weekend I'm going to start creating my own NFTs, and I'll send you a price list, Rich. I've got some lovely sort of gecko-y cartoon things, and they are
tulip bulbs you can buy as well, Rich, if you like.
0.005 of a Bitcoin.
Wow, that's expensive. No,
I think you'll find it's good value for money.
No, I'm keen. I'm going to explore all these avenues because it's just I love new stuff.
I've got a question for David. How do you do your own listening program for people who come to you with ideas? So, if we talk about that kind of demand, if law firms came to you with an idea, how does that work at the moment? Is that something that you tell me? Yeah, That's the question, really.
Wow, what an interesting sort of question. I wish law firms were that innovative.
Right.
Don't we all? I think, as we sort of talked about, the extent to which they've engaged with digital channels is, perhaps a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting here and there. One actually had had one of the tellies up in the boardroom that they were very proud of as well, which which made me chuckle. But I I guess as I said at the start, really, I guess there's a real challenge here between, as an organisation that organises events in the legal space, there's a real challenge between leading and just sort of striking out and saying, this is kind of what we think networking or legal events looks like in 2022.
Yeah.
And then responding to feedback. And I think Rich has provided some really sort of useful thoughts around Legal X, and the pitfalls that befell them. We've taken away a huge amount of feedback from this hybrid awards ceremony that we ran in October, which was in the wills and probate space. So I suppose really in this sort of new age, before we get to the metaverse, while we're still sort of just in this universe, we're still sort of, it still feels as though we're kind of tweaking things as we go along. And responding to feedback as we go along, because the reality is that we're still all in uncharted territory in many ways, in terms of certainly delivering hybrid events. We've all delivered, a whole load of virtual events, but we're now starting, particularly over the last 6 months, to see, well, what does a virtual event look like? And as I said at the start, I think the real challenge with that is around demonstrating value, demonstrating engagement, and finding ways to do that. I don't know whether that answers your question, Simon, but it's
no, it does. I like it.
Bit of a musing of them.
Well, it certainly sounds like you're open to the idea of them coming and speaking to you about that anyway, which is
definitely.
And then, Kat, I was going to ask Kat, do you ever do any competitor analysis on how people show up at those kind of things as well? Do you ever look at any of that from Flow Insight, and do you ever look at, okay, this is how people, this is their event strategy?
Yeah, you can tell quite easily who actually takes events seriously just by the number of awards that they win. In like as a firm.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to see. You can see some of them just have a blanket strategy of just going for any single award, whereas others are actually looking at their own strategy and saying we need to credibly kind of justify that. But yeah, my question to David O about whether smaller firms are actually taking it seriously or thinking that they can actually be on that level playing field is one that I think is an opportunity. I think, David, I had a look at your wills and probate awards, and there were just, I think it was a host of different firms from different, like very small size regional firms to very big ones. And yeah, I think there is definitely an opportunity there for smaller firms. But the bigger firms, you can see they either have a budget and only go for a couple of things, or they just go for everything. So
it's a bit like Simon said, you've to try and cater for all those different kind of organizations, and it's not easy, and some people do get left by the wayside, very sadly, and frustratingly. But if you genuinely want to kind of create awards ceremonies that recognizes and celebrates excellence, you've kind of got to have enough of a groundswell of organizations to judge in order to sort of generate that excellence. Otherwise, if you're judging from a pool of 2 or 3 organizations because you're trying to be inclusive, you're not genuinely kind of celebrating excellence.
I think that's such a brilliant observation, isn't it? What was your motivation behind running and recognizing? Are you trying to recognize genuinely the best of that thing, or are you trying to recognize in light of these criteria that you've laid down already and that's determined already? And I think that the aspiration that you've just talked about there really has opened my eyes. I feel that really motivates me. When I hear that, I think, okay, that's great. I mean, because you think about it, we have to deal with it all the time as legal marketers. We have to deal with the directories process. This peg doesn't quite fit your like your round hole where you've got to do something different. We've got to explain why that's the case. And I think we have to do that again and again and again across awards, across directories, across anything that we do. So it's kind of interesting to know that actually you can maybe infer that the category could allow for that kind of.
I mean, running awards is and you know, don't get your violin out by any stretch of the imagination, but running awards is really tough because in a lot of ways you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
And you know, there's, dare I say, there's a lot of wool pulling over people's eyes as well. And you know, it's interesting that the Legal Services Board's efforts to, you know, continue the whole transparency discussion is still very relevant, because there are so few measures of genuine excellence in legal services, and that is really, really tough. That is really, really tough. You know, I mean, you can talk about customer reviews, you can talk about you know, sort of legal expertise and perhaps something like the legal 500, but you know, it's such a subjective industry that actually genuinely, you know, identifying excellence is well, it's very, very difficult. Very difficult.
So 3 things really quickly on that. One is, I think that the emergence of kind of some of those review sites is helping because of the sheer volume of voices that are coming forward. That doesn't always apply for kind of major corporate commercial firms. So I think for a lot of the rest of the market, having those reviews out there and that being shared is a slightly more authoritative way of kind of like doing that. And I think it might be something that people can think about for shortlists. Don't know. 2, it's interesting to see that Law Society is ending its own award ceremony, because I think that having that idea of being, you know, are we the club or do we represent the industry, and actually trying to run those 2 is not a great idea. And the third one, just very quickly, because I know we're keen to wrap things up soon, is I was at an awards maybe 15 years ago for one of the major magazines, David, and an editor, a very famous editor, nudged me and said, "Didn't the M&A award just win the banking category and a banking award just win the corporate category?" So even those people who like report on that every day of their lives still seem to make the wrong choices sometimes. I was just laughing. I was just watching people literally win the wrong award from each other as well. So,
I was going to say, the only, within the legal sector, the only one where I've seen awards where it's been heavily kind of, they vet it in a way, is the LawNet membership, because all the preferred suppliers, a number of software providers, so review solicitors are in it, law leagues in it, and then Insight 6, they all take all the data and the feedback from the LawNet members, and it then goes to external judges. And I've been in a situation where I was a judge on that panel, and I had a client, a LawNet member, who basically was coming up against a non-client, and I did have to choose. And in the end, I just kind of said, I'm going to take myself out of this equation, because I did feel it was conflicting, but unfortunately it was too late, and they said, we need you to decide. And I did go on merit personally, although I did get a bit of backlash from the client. But that's the only membership body that I've seen the closest of where they've got external backlash.
Oh, right, okay.
What did you think I said?
Backcash.
No. No, I definitely did not get paid anything extra. No, definitely not.
That's a whole other area.
Cash for honours, yes.
And on that bombshell.
We are going to have to wrap up for this episode. David, thank you very much for joining us today. As we mentioned in the pre-show, thankfully you haven't had to have a 6-hour drive down the length of the country to join us. You've been able to do it from the comfort of your room, which is always good. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn, as you might well imagine. So David Opie on LinkedIn, or my email may very well be the best. It's david.opie@todaysmedia.co.uk. And that's very kind of you, David. Thanks so much for inviting me on. I really, really appreciate it.
That's absolutely fine. And then just before we go, any final words, heaven forbid, from any of the rest of the elves here?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and good luck to everybody who is entering the awards. And
And in case anyone's wondering, no, we are not doing an outro of singing Good King Wenceslas. That was just a vicious rumor. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are, I believe, we're going to be taking a break now until the new year. Because well, I know I generally start drinking around now and sort of surface sometime around January 3rd. For everyone watching this, please have a wonderful, safe, enjoyable Christmas festive period, and we look forward to seeing you again in the new year. But until then, take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.